Okay, in order to simplify this algebraic fraction, we need to factorise both the top and the bottom. I'm going to start with the bottom because actually that's easier. So 50x squared minus 2, we can see that there's a common factor there of 2, which means that we can put in a bracket 25x squared minus 1. And we should then recognise that that expression is what we call the difference of two squares. This 25x squared is actually the square of 5x. And 1 is just the square of 1. So I can factorise, I'll leave the 2 there, I can factorise this, the difference of two squares always factorises to the same thing. Brackets are the same, in one of them we've got 5x, in the other one 5x. Here we've got 1 and here we've got 1, but in one of the brackets there'll be a plus, and in the other one there'll be a minus. So that's how the bottom factorises. Now let's have a look at the top, and I can kind of cheat here really. I've got 5x squared plus 14x minus 3, and on the bottom I've got my 50x squared minus 2. I can see that the top is going to factorise to two brackets. That's a very typical quadratic, so it's going to be two brackets. Don't know what they are yet, but I do know that the bottom is 2, and then 5x plus 1, 5x minus 1. Now I can be a bit crafty here because I can realise that actually if this is going to simplify at all, one of these two brackets at the top must either be 5x plus 1 or 5x minus 1. So I'm going to put that here. I'm going to put 5x and then I'm going to put 1. And then I'm going to realise that the other bracket then is going to have to be an x there to give me the 5x squared, which I require here. And then I'm also going to have a 3 so that I can end up with minus 3. Now it's either going to be plus 1 minus 3, which will give me minus 3, or it might be minus 1 plus 3. So let's see which it's going to be by looking at this middle term. The middle term, to get 14x, I'm going to have to make that positive. That will give me 15x by multiplying those two together, and then minus 1x, well there's my 14x, and then minus 1 times 3 is 3. So just mentally remove the bracket, or you can actually do it. 5x times x is 5x squared, minus 1x plus 15x is plus 14x, and then minus 1 times 3 is minus 3. I can now see that that bracket is going to cancel with that one. Remember, you're allowed to cancel because everything is multiplied together. That's why we factorise. And I'm left with, on the top, x plus 3, and on the bottom, 2 brackets 5x plus 1. You can remove the bracket on the bottom, but actually it's better to leave it like that. Now, if you didn't spot this sort of quick trick, you needed to be able to factorise 5x squared plus 14x minus 3. Now, there's a couple of different ways of doing that. The crisscross method, which I like, you've got to think of two numbers that multiply together to make 5. Well, it's got to be 5 and 1. And then you've got to look at two numbers that multiply together to give me minus 3. So let's say I choose 3 and minus 1. Now, the crisscross method says you multiply those two together, that's minus 5. Multiply those two together, that's 3. And if those two numbers add up to the 14 in the middle, then you've done it. Now, obviously, minus 5 plus 3 doesn't work, so that's no good. Let's try 5, 3, minus 1, 3. So 5 times 3 is 15. 1 times minus 1 is minus 1. And if we add those two together, that gives us 14, which is correct because there's 14 in the middle. And my two brackets then come from those two numbers. So one of my brackets would be 5x minus 1. And then my other bracket comes from these two numbers. So 1, so in other words, 1x plus 3. Same as I've got here, look. Another way of factorising 5x squared plus 14x minus 3, remember, is to find two numbers, a and b. Now, a times b has to be the product of these two, so 5 times minus 3, which is minus 15, and a plus b has to be this number in the middle, in other words, 14. So in other words, you're looking for two numbers that multiply to make minus 14 and add up to 14. So a and b then are going to be 15 and minus 1. What we then do is we split up our 5x squared plus 14x minus 3. So split this up into 5x squared plus 15x minus x. So there's the 15 and the minus 1 here, and then minus 3. And now we factorise these two. So 5x is a common factor, so it's 5x times x plus 3. and then it's also going to be minus 1 times x plus 3. Remember, we're factorising by grouping here, so x plus 3 is a common factor, and then that x plus 3, the common factor, we take it out, and we're left with 5x minus 1. So that's another way of factorising the top. Either way, you always end up back at this stage, and that's your final answer.